Hello friend, welcome to Stories by Tocci. We bring you interesting folk tales. Please don't forget to hit the like button, please share, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you for doing so. Now let's get into the story. The morning Samoto first saw her was no different from the many forgettable ones that had tiptoed past him in Ogata Town. He had swept the entrance of his small bookshop, arranged the rows of mock exams and storybooks like a priest laying communion cups, and was settling into his usual rhythm of selling and humming to himself. The town was still half asleep, its narrow roads blinking under the pale gaze of the sun, when a voice soft enough to be wind, yet certain enough to turn a man's head, broke through the wooden arch of his shop entrance. "Good morning, sir. Do you have physics past questions?" she asked, peering in. There was something in her voice like rainfall on dry zinc, unexpected but pleasant. Samoto looked up and saw a girl, tall and slender, wearing a navy blue pinafore with a loosely tied scarf over her braids. She stood with the grace of a leaf untouched by storm, and when she stepped into the shop, her presence filled it as if the air had been holding its breath just for her. He responded, tried to keep it businesslike, but his hands fumbled with the book titles like a boy handling his first gift. She paid and thanked him with a shy smile that did not reach her eyes. As she turned to leave, her footsteps carried an echo of something unfinished. Without fully knowing why, he called out, "Wait, what's your name again?" She turned, brows raised, and he stumbled through an excuse about forgotten receipts, but it was a weak wall hiding his true intention. "Ziora," she said, with a slight tilt of her head, like someone handing you a secret and watching how you hold it. He scribbled his number on the back of a page and handed it to her, watching her fingers as they closed around it like a whisper catching fire. He hadn't expected her to call, but she did, later that evening, just as he was locking up, phone pressed to his chest like he'd been expecting a miracle to dial itself. Her voice sounded different over the phone, less guarded, more playful. They talked first about the book, then drifted to topics like whether it's true that boys who sell books are better listeners than those who sell phone accessories. She laughed easily, like someone not trying to impress anyone, and that laugh tiptoed into Samoto's chest and refused to leave. The sky outside his shop had darkened, but inside him, something was lighting candles. She mentioned that she was preparing for her final exams, and when he asked her age, her response surprised him. "I'm 18, she said. 18, Kel?" he echoed, the surprise skipping out of his mouth before his thoughts could catch it. "You don't look it at all. You carry yourself like someone older." She chuckled again, a sound that felt like salt sprinkled on roasted ground nuts. "People say that all the time. Maybe it's because I'm the firstborn. My mom says I've always acted like her younger sister." There was a pause, not awkward, just a type that stretches when hearts lean in. "You?" she asked. "How old are you?" 29, he replied, clearing his throat. "But I still laugh at cartoons sometimes, if that counts." She giggled, and for a moment the age gap felt like a swinging rope bridge between two cliffs, shaky, yes, but crossable. They didn't talk about love, not yet. Just about books, the price of suya and ogata, and the silence that comes when you don't know you're falling until you've already tripped. The days that followed moved like wet clothes hung under a reluctant sun, slow, but full of promise. They didn't see each other physically, but the calls came almost every evening, sometimes just before the power went out, sometimes after midnight, when Samoto would step outside to get better signal. He found himself waiting for her messages like a farmer watches clouds for signs of rain. He didn't press to see her again, not immediately. There was something sacred about the way they were unfolding, like a snail testing its way out of its shell. Eventually, he asked if she'd visit. "Maybe after my exams," she said. "I don't want any distractions. I'm trying to do well this time around." He respected that. In fact, it made her even more intriguing. Most girls he knew would have jumped at the invitation, thrown suggestive emojis, but Ziora was different, calm, not loud, and wise in ways that made her feel like a book with pages still unturned. He began checking up on her regularly, Voice notes filled with encouragement, airtime sent without asking, and questions like, "Did you sleep well?" and "How's your mom?" She always replied with warmth, not urgency, as if she wasn't rushing anything, and maybe that's what kept Samoto hooked the pace. Not every story needs drums. Some enter like flutes in the distance, slow and sure. When she eventually came to visit him, it was on a Saturday soaked with sunlight, the kind of day when even shadows wore golden linings. She arrived in a simple pink blouse and skirt, her hair packed up in a neat bun, and her eyes scanning the street like someone checking for watchers. Samoto welcomed her with palm sweat hidden behind his calm smile. They talked first about exams, about how tired she was, about nothing and everything. Time slipped past them unnoticed. At one point, she helped him pack some books back into the shelves, and their fingers brushed. That's when the air changed, like when a match is struck in a room full of gas. The intimacy didn't begin with lust. It began with longing that had hidden itself behind friendship. One moment she was laughing about how dusty some books were, and the next they were on the bed, wrapped in a silence louder than any song. Afterward, she lay still, not crying, not smiling, just quiet. And then she got up, adjusted her clothes, and said, "I have to go." He nodded, offering to call a bike for her, his own heart beating like someone had poured stones into it. As she walked away, he stood at the doorway, feeling like he'd opened a door that could never be closed again. The following days drifted by like smoke from a smoldering ember, present, visible, yet hard to hold. Samoto tried not to replay the memory of Ziora's visit, but it kept knocking on the doors of his mind like a debt collector with no intention to leave. He would sit behind the counter, surrounded by textbooks that now felt like strangers, his eyes glazing over the same titles he once arranged with pride. The bookshop was still, save for the occasional footsteps of students coming in to ask for mock-past questions or payment balance. Yet, even amidst the noise of pages flipping and coins clinking into his drawer, Samoto's thoughts wandered. Ziora hadn't called since the visit, and though they hadn't agreed on what would come next, the silence left him uneasy. He tried to distract himself with errands, restocking, sweeping the front tiles, even scrubbing the dusty shelves, but the quiet between them felt like a badly tuned radio. It buzzed with what-ifs and half-spoken fears. Then, one evening, just as dusk began peeling the skin off day, his phone buzzed. The screen blinked her name like a heartbeat on a monitor. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice trembling like a leaf caught in midwind. Samoto stood frozen, fingers curling around the phone like it might fall if he loosened his grip. "I think I'm pregnant," she added. The words landed with the weight of bricks thrown into a calm stream, sudden, loud, irreversible. He didn't speak at first. His mind galloped like a wild horse, with no reins. Then he asked, almost whispering, "Are you sure?" "I missed my period," she replied. "Twice." He didn't sleep that night. The ceiling fan hummed above his bed, but his mind ran hotter than the room's dry air. Thoughts wrestled in his head like stubborn goats refusing to be tied. Was this a mistake, a moment of weakness, or simply a doorway life had decided to open without knocking? He remembered her quiet eyes, the hesitant way she buttoned her blouse that day, and the silence that followed their parting. There had been no plan, no talk of forever, just the gravity of one moment pulling two people into a place neither of them had prepared for. Still, somewhere between guilt and shock, Samoto knew one thing: he would not abandon her. "If you're carrying my child," he texted the next morning, "then I will marry you. I'm not running away." It was a message he read 10 times before hitting send. Ziora's reply came slowly, "Okay. I told my mom. She wants to meet you." His heart skipped, not out of fear, but out of the weight of what meeting a mother meant. It wasn't just a formality. It was the first step into unfamiliar terrain. A week later, he boarded a Kiki to Ibudo, a town 2 junctions away from Ogata, where Ziora lived with her mother. The ride was bumpy, the roads filled with potholes that echoed inside his chest like drums warning of battle. When he arrived, Ziora met him outside. She wore a long gown with tiny floral prints and her hair braided neatly to the side. "My mum's inside," she said softly. "Come nephews. Come tete, penetlopa, amene banadella, usos estende me surfer, of that avere was you to a family services to content, booming." Her mother was not what Samoto had expected. She wasn't stern nor loud, but there was a firmness in her eyes that made him sit straighter than usual. The house was modest, with a tiled sitting room, faded curtains, and plastic chairs stacked neatly at the corner. Ziora's younger brother peeked from behind a curtain, his face curious but cautious. "So you're the one," her mother began, not smiling, but not frowning either. Samoto nodded respectfully. "Yes, Ma. My name is Samoto, and I've come to do the right thing." She offered him water, which he declined out of nervousness, then leaned back and folded her arms like someone listening to a story she already knew the ending to. "My daughter says you're willing to marry her," she said plainly. "You understand that she's still young, still has her future ahead of her?" He nodded again, the words clinging to his throat like unripe pawpaw. "Yes, Ma. I'm aware. I didn't plan for things to happen this way, but I won't run from my responsibility." Marriage is not a shelter for guilt. It's a storm you enter with your eyes open. I hope you're not just reacting to fear. He swallowed hard. "Ma, my, would you have supers? With it, now, na, my, the forest forward. Yama, money, yet, yon, zits, it is work. Your buyers that have an eggs, are fat, I was if of the luck. Baham, sitting by the palmies. Your flares are half was by that farce to the dark. Your evils are flat. Your views ever false are for yes that hope. Your was ever enough on baffle than a nevin, sir, to sir. Your ways is ever nevins, ever is ever, and maybe as ever. "I want to do this right." She sighed, her face unreadable. "You can go. I'll discuss with my daughter and we'll get back to you." As he stood to leave, Ziora walked him out silently. They didn't talk, but her hand brushed his slightly, a wordless gesture that said more than her lips could manage. That evening, Samoto returned to his room feeling like he had walked into the middle of a film whose script had been changed midway. He paced the narrow hallway of his compound, thinking about the woman he had just met and the man he hadn't. Ziora's father hadn't been mentioned once, and it left a sour aftertaste in his mouth. He called her after dinner, his voice low. "I didn't see your dad. When can I come back to meet him?" The line went quiet for a while. Then she responded with the kind of gentleness used to break glass without shattering it. "My parents are separated. He doesn't live with us. He has another wife, other kids. I don't really talk to him." Samoto's heart clenched. He had grown up in a house where both his parents sat together every morning before the radio, where his mother laughed with his father even when they argued the night before. The thought of entering a home already split down the middle gave him pause. "But I still need to see him," he said. "It's not just tradition, it's respect." Ziora's sigh was audible. "I'll talk to my mum about it." "Please do," he added, more to himself than to her. That night, as the generator hummed in the background and mosquitoes performed their nightly opera, Samoto lay on his bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how you marry a person whose roots you haven't touched. The call came the next evening, just as Samoto was about to close his shop. The air was thick with the smell of burnt firewood from a nearby food vendor, and the sun had started limping toward the western horizon like a tired traveler seeking shelter. When he saw Ziora's name flashing on the screen, a part of him braced for the unknown. He answered with a calm voice, but his chest drummed like a talking drum begging to be heard. "My mum said I should tell you that there's no need to see my dad," Ziora said, her voice as light as harmattan dust yet heavy with finality. For a moment, Samoto said nothing. The words didn't sit right. They hovered in the air like smoke refusing to clear. He cleared his throat and replied slowly, like someone peeling yam with a blunt knife. No need to see your dad? But I need to. That's your father. It's his daughter I want to marry, not just your mother's. Ziora didn't argue. She simply repeated, that's what my mom said. A silence followed, the kind that stretches and snaps if pulled too long. Let me think about it, Samoto finally said. After the call ended, he remained seated at the wooden bench outside his shop, staring blankly at the road as schoolchildren ran past, their laughter mocking the unease in his heart. The street that once buzzed with noise now felt distant and unfamiliar, like a place he had never really known until now. He closed his shop much later than usual, the keys jangling in his hand like confused thoughts. The next day, Samoto sought counsel from the only place he knew would offer truth without decoration, his mother. Mama Chenier, as she was fondly called, was the woman carved from quiet strength. She sold vegetables at Ogata's main market, and had raised her children with more wisdom than wealth. That evening, she was shelling groundnuts in front of their compound when Samoto approached her, his steps unsure. He sat beside her, picked up a handful of nuts, and began shelling too. It took several minutes of silence before he finally spoke. Mama, what if a man wants to marry a girl, but the girl's father is alive and they say you can't see him? She didn't look at him immediately. Instead, she dropped the empty shells into a bowl and replied, Is the man dead? No, Samoto answered. He's alive, but not in her life. They say he's married to another woman, and they barely talk. Mama Chenier shook her head gently, her eyes still fixed on her task. Samoto, a woman can carry a child in her womb for 9 months, but that doesn't mean she should carry her alone to the altar. If the father is alive and breathing, he should be seen, even if it's just for formality. She stopped, placed the bowl down, and turned to face him. What kind of family are you entering where the mother stands as both bride and groom's side? My son, do not use love to blind your common sense. The words settled on Samoto's shoulders like a dusty shawl. He nodded slowly, chewing the thoughts like bitter cola, hard to swallow, but needed. Samoto tried to return to routine, but his mind had become a marketplace of unrest. His customers noticed his silence. He answered questions with nods and forgot to give change until reminded. Even the street boys who often came to flip through storybooks for fun avoided his gaze. That week, he saw less of Ziora, her texts became fewer, her calls shorter. But when they did speak, she sounded torn. Why does it matter so much to see him? She asked one evening, her voice soft. He didn't raise me. He left when I was small. My mom did everything. Samoto sighed. I get it. But I wasn't raised by him either. I'm not marrying a girl in isolation. I'm marrying into a family. And if there's a man somewhere who still carries your surname, I need to know he won't surface later to say I stole what belongs to him. Ziora went quiet. Then, in almost a whisper, she said, I'll try to talk to her again. But she's firm. She doesn't want you anywhere near my father. That night, Samoto lay on his back, staring at the ceiling with questions clawing at his mind. What kind of woman blocks a man from seeing the other half of a decision this big? He wasn't trying to drag old wounds open, but he didn't want to build a future on one leg either. A marriage without a father's blessing wasn't his fear. It was what that absence might mean years down the line when children ask questions and the answers stammer. By the end of that week, the whispers had started in Ogata. Not loud gossip, but quiet murmurs from friends who noticed things. Samoto's childhood friend, Jide, stopped by the shop to buy a pen, but ended up lingering. I heard small gist, he began, leaning on the counter like someone about to pull out a thorn. They say the girl you're seeing, her family no day complete. Samoto chuckled dryly. Which family complete? No, I mean, them say the mother they act like nah she born herself. No father, no uncle. Nobody. Samoto looked away, jaw tightening. I'm still trying to understand everything, he said. I want to do the right thing, but I also want to be wise. Jide shrugged. Wisdom no day shout. Just look well. People they marry, yes, but people they enter fireway wear lipstick too. After Gede left, the words clung to Samoto's ears like cobwebs that refused to clear. That evening, he walked past the local Anglican church, and though service wasn't on, he sat under the mango tree in the compound. He didn't pray, just sat, listening to the silence and trying to find peace in the breeze. But peace didn't come. Only questions. He loved Ziora, or at least the version of her he had come to know, but love wasn't enough to patch foundation cracks in a house he hadn't even entered yet. And as the wind rustled the leaves above him, Samoto began to wonder if this path he'd taken would lead to a wedding or a crossroad. The decision to visit again wasn't born out of curiosity, but conviction, the kind that grips a man's chest and refuses to let go even after sleep has folded the rest of his body in peace. Samoto had not told Ziora he was coming. He wanted to look her mother in the eyes without the dance of pretense that usually accompanied appointments. That morning, he ironed his shirt twice, polished his shoes until the dust had no reason to land, and left Ogata with more questions than answers in his heart. The road to Ibudo felt longer than before, the potholes deeper, the trees taller. When he arrived at their compound, the rusted gate creaked like it hadn't been opened in weeks. Ziora wasn't home. Her younger brother, Uma, led him to the sitting room where her mother sat on a plastic chair, peeling oranges as if she were sculpting answers into fruit. She didn't look surprised to see him. I had to come, Samoto said quietly, standing like a boy before a headmistress. I don't mean to offend, Ma, but I can't marry your daughter without meeting her father. She sighed and set the half-peeled orange aside, her hands sticky with juice and thoughts. You men, always chasing ghosts because tradition tells you so. That man left her when she couldn't even spell her name. He hasn't sent her a wrapper, not even on her birthdays. Yet now you say you must see him before you marry her. Her voice didn't rise, but each word hit like raindrops on a metal roof, sharp and sure. What if he doesn't want to see you? What if he refuses to come? Will you now say my daughter is unworthy of marriage? Samoto blinked slowly. No, ma. I'm a dance of bats than bastuetse. Kufkior batsato missiopre. So for tamen salfo tipi the bametrior. No, ma. Saicho tamet by toto bababazidi. Wazabo? Yose salfo bore baber for yuri fiesa. But I need to know who I'm building a future with. I need to understand what she comes from. Is that too much to ask? The conversation that followed didn't escalate into shouting, but it simmered like Adrienne soup, pungent, lingering, hard to ignore. Her mother leaned forward and folded her arms across her chest. Do you want to marry a family or a person? Because what you're doing now feels like you're fishing in water that's already been boiled. Samoto struggled to find the right words, not because he hadn't thought them through, but because he didn't want to seem disrespectful. Ma, I'm not trying to undermine you. I respect everything you've done for Ziora, but I didn't create the rules of marriage. We all come from somewhere, and I need clarity. Even if your husband left, he still has a place in her story. I just want to speak with him, hear from him, look him in the eye and say, this is my intention. I owe it to myself, to her, and to the child she's carrying. The woman smiled sadly, like someone who knew a truth too bitter to say aloud. He won't see you. Even if I allowed it, he won't show up. You think men like that like being reminded of what they abandoned? He'll hear your name and disappear like chalk in rain. The air between them thickened. So you mean you can give her hand in marriage without him? He asked finally. Yes, she said. I've been both mother and father for 18 years. If anybody has the right, it's me. Samoto nodded slowly, his heart heavier than the bag of textbooks he once carried to market. He stood, thanked her, and left. As he stepped outside, Uma was chasing a lizard with a stick, his laughter bouncing off the compound walls. Life, it seemed, didn't pause for complicated choices. Back in Ogata, Samoto's mind was like an overfilled drawer, thoughts spilling out from every corner. He didn't speak much that week. His greetings became shorter, his smiles harder to find. The only place he found some semblance of comfort was at his shop, where the rustle of pages and scent of ink reminded him that some things remained stable. Ziora called him 2 days later. "You went to see my mom?" she asked, her tone unreadable. "I had to," he replied, "and I understand more now, but I'm still not at peace." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "You're not marrying my father. You're marrying me." "I know," he replied, "but every road has a beginning, and I just want to make sure we're not skipping steps that matter." Her voice trembled slightly. "You think I'm hiding something?" "No," he said gently, "but it feels like I'm being asked to walk into a storm with my eyes half closed." She sighed, then whispered, "I wish you saw things from my side. I've spent years watching my mother do both jobs. She's hard, yes, but she means well." Samoto rubbed his forehead, feeling the weight of decision pressing harder than ever. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said. "I need to think." After the call, he walked aimlessly through the dusty streets of Ogata, past women frying akara and children chasing old tires, searching for a peace that wouldn't be found in a place so loud with silence. He didn't sleep that night, and not properly. His pillow felt like it was stuffed with questions instead of foam. Around 3 a.m., he got up and went outside, standing under the sky painted in dark indigo with blinking stars that seemed to pity him. He thought about everything, about how quickly his life had changed, about the innocence that became intimacy, and the consequences that followed like shadows tied to his feet. He remembered how her hand felt in his, how she looked when she first walked into his shop in that navy blue school uniform, and how now, just weeks later, he was standing at a crossroads with no signpost in sight. He wasn't afraid of fatherhood. That part he had made peace with. It was the structure around it that worried him, the invisible cracks, the silences that stretched too long, the unspoken pain hiding behind her mother's eyes. If he married Ziora without her father's blessing, what foundation was he standing on? If he insisted on seeing him, would it create a wound that might never close? He walked back inside and sat on the edge of his bed, eyes fixed on nothing, heart torn between what felt right and what felt wise. Morning found him still sitting, as if sleep had taken one look at his troubled mind and decided it was too heavy to carry. The next few days rolled by like a cart with a shaky wheel moving forward, but every turn made the journey more uneasy. Samoto's silence became a second skin, one he couldn't shed even when surrounded by noise. He still opened his shop each morning, swept the floor like a ritual, arranged the textbooks with precision, but the joy of it had drained like palm wine left open too long. Customers came and went, but he hardly saw their faces. His friends noticed the change, but no one asked directly, except for Ndubizi, the barber next door, who leaned into Samoto's doorway one hot afternoon and asked, "Bro, are you all right at all? Your shadow day come before you these days." Samoto forced a smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes, and said, "I'm just thinking about something big." That evening, he returned home, sat on the wooden chair in the backyard, and stared at the moon. It hung low and pale, like an old lantern struggling to stay lit. He reached for his phone and dialed Ziora. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was quiet, cautious, like someone walking barefoot over broken bottles. "Have you eaten?" he asked. She chuckled faintly. "Yes." "You?" "Yes, hey, Leet." After a pause, he added, "I've been thinking. What if your mom is wrong? What if your father does want to see me, but no one has given him the chance?" Ziora sighed, not out of frustration, but out of fatigue. You're still holding on to that? Because it matters to me, he said, firmly but gently. A father's silence is one thing. Denying him a voice is another. She didn't respond right away, but he could hear her breath on the line, as though the words were gathering strength at the tip of her tongue. You don't understand, she finally whispered. That man hurt my mother. He walked out and never looked back. For years, we begged him to visit, to show up on visiting days, PTA meetings, birthdays, nothing. And now, after all these years, you want to drag his name back into my life, into my peace? Her voice cracked toward the end, the anger in her tone not directed at Samoto, but at time itself for not healing fast enough. Ziora, I'm not dragging him back. I'm trying to complete the picture. Even if he abandoned you, this child you're carrying deserves to know that I tried to do things properly, Samoto said, his voice heavy but composed. I'm not against your mother. I'm just not comfortable marrying someone whose father I never met. If I do that, I might sleep with my eyes open for the rest of my life. Ziora remained quiet. The silence stretched so long, he thought the call had ended. Then she said, You want a perfect family, but I didn't come from one. If that's what you're waiting for, I'm not the girl you should marry. The words came out soft, but they burned like ground pepper rubbed into a fresh wound. He closed his eyes. That's not what I'm saying, he replied, but she had already ended the call. The sound of the line going dead echoed in his ears like a slammed door in an empty hallway. The following morning, Samoto didn't go to the shop. He sat in his room, phone in hand, rereading old chats between them. He saw how it started, light, innocent, full of laughter. The pictures she sent after each exam, the voice notes full of yawns and soft chuckles, the way she always said thank you when he recharged her phone even though she never asked for it. But now, all of it felt like borrowed time, something beautiful built on soil too soft to stand forever. Around noon, his phone rang. It was G-Day. Omo, I day past your shop and saw it locked. You sick? No, Samoto replied. Just resting. You sure say no be that girl matter? G-Day asked, jokingly. Sometimes I feel say you don't enter past where your leg reach. Samoto gave a weak laugh. Maybe. Gay sighed. Look, I know you mean well. But I beg, don't let pity tie your destiny. You go marry the girl, but you go carry the family join. Ask yourself, can you carry both without breaking? His eyes looked tired, not from sleepless nights, but from dragging a decision that refused to move. He wasn't looking for perfection. He just wanted truth, something solid to stand on. But truth was proving slipperier than a fish in cold water. Later that day, Ziora showed up at his doorstep unannounced. She wore a loose gown that floated around her like a curtain in the wind, her face bare, her eyes swollen, but not from crying, more like from thinking too much. He opened the door and stood aside. She walked in without saying a word and sat on the edge of his bed. He didn't sit. He stood there, hands on his waist, waiting. Finally, she said, My mom said there's no need to force what won't work. She said the father you're looking for is a mistake she's still paying for. Samoto rubbed his forehead. So that's it? I should marry you and erase half your history because your mother says so? Ziora looked up at him, pain etched into the curve of her lips. I'm not asking you to erase anything. I'm asking you to choose me, not the structure, not the background, just me. He sighed and sat beside her. And if I do, what happens if your father resurfaces one day, drunk and bitter, shouting that I never met him? What will I tell our child then? She reached for his hand. You'll tell them the truth, that you tried, but I couldn't help you reach him. Her voice was firm now, no longer trembling. I didn't choose this chaos, but I'm living with it, and I'm offering you what I can. He stared at their fingers intertwined, unsure if love alone could carry the weight of missing foundations. As the sun sank behind the rooftops of Ogata, the room grew dimmer, and the silence between them held its breath. Days passed like clouds with no promise of rain, hazy, suspended, and full of questions that hovered just outside the reach of answers. Samoto and Ziora didn't talk much after that last visit. Their words had run ahead of them, and now they both sat in the echo of everything they didn't say. He went back to his routine, opening the shop at sunrise, arranging the shelves with mechanical precision, greeting customers with a smile that had cracks only he could feel. But inside he was a river in flood, carrying memories, hopes, and fears tangled in one rushing current. He thought about the future in fragments, the sound of a baby's cry, the rustle of school books years from now, a dining table with two people silently enduring each other for the sake of peace. Every time he tried to imagine marriage without knowing Ziora's full story, it felt like walking into a house where one door was permanently locked and no one would tell you what was behind it. One afternoon, as he sorted through a delivery of new textbooks, a customer asked, "Olga, now you get that girl Bella Binalai?" The question came from a boy no older than 16, his eyes full of mischief. Samoto froze for a second, then responded calmly, "Mind your books, not people's business." But the question stayed with him. He hadn't told many people, yet the street had heard. Whispers have wings, and in towns like Ogata, they fly faster than sense. That evening, after locking the shop, he walked home slower than usual, his slippers dragging on the gravel like his thoughts. At his front door, he found a note tucked into the frame. It was from Ziora. Her handwriting was neat, almost too careful, like someone trying to hold herself together through ink. It read, "I know you're struggling, but I'm not asking you to fix me or my family. I just need you to believe that I won't let this child walk alone. I'm not my mother, and I'm not my father either. If you want to let go, I'll understand. But if you still want to fight for us, I'll be here." He read the letter twice, then folded it carefully like it was made of glass. He sat outside on the wooden bench, the same place he once joked with her over the phone, the same place where everything had begun with a soft laugh and a request for a book. He thought about his mother's voice, her groundnut-scented advice about love and caution, about not allowing pity to tie down destiny. But he also thought about the baby now growing in Ziora's womb, the one who didn't ask to be conceived into such confusion. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing. Some stories don't come neatly wrapped. Some beginnings are jagged, some middles messy, but that doesn't mean they can't end in beauty. He took a deep breath and reached for his phone. 2 days later, he asked Ziora to meet him at his shop after closing time. When she arrived, the sun was just beginning to slip behind the roofs, painting the town in gold. She wore a simple gown with slippers, no makeup, her face raw and unhidden. Samoto pulled out 2 chairs and gestured for her to sit. They sat side by side, facing the road, not talking at first. The evening breeze was cool, and nearby a woman roasted corn on a tray balanced with stones. Finally he spoke. "I've made up my mind." She turned to him slowly, her face unreadable. "I'm not running," he said. "Not from you. Not from the baby. Not even from your mother's stubbornness." She opened her mouth to speak, but he held up a hand. "But we must talk to someone neutral, someone who can guide us. A pastor, a mentor, even your school principal if that's who you trust. Because love is not enough. Love can carry you, yes, but only wisdom can build a home that won't collapse in the first storm." She nodded, tears shining in her eyes, but not falling. "I want this too, Samoto. I just didn't know how to offer it." He took her hand gently. "We're both learning. But let's not build with fear. Let's build with clarity. Even if your father won't come, I'll do everything I can to be the father this child will never question." She squeezed his hand, and for the first time in weeks, her smile reached her eyes. The wedding didn't happen in a rush. It took months of slow planning, quiet visits, and countless late-night conversations. Somoto met with a pastor in Abuto who helped him understand more about family trauma and emotional boundaries. Ziora continued her education privately, determined not to let motherhood dim her dreams. Her mother remained firm, even difficult at times, but she eventually stepped back when she saw that their union was not based on guilt or pressure, but mutual respect. Somoto never did get to meet Ziora's father, but he made peace with that. Some doors don't open, no matter how hard you knock. What mattered now was how he handled the keys he did hold. When the baby came a girl, they named her Amarachi, meaning God's grace. And truly, she was. The first night he held her, tiny and warm in his arms, he whispered a silent promise, not just to her, but to himself, that no matter what storms came, he would be her shelter. Not perfect, not without flaws, but steady. And as the little girl yawned and curled her fingers around his pinky, Somoto felt something shift inside him. Not a conclusion, but a beginning. And perhaps that's what love truly is. Not a grand arrival at happiness, but a patient journey through uncertainty, with faith that every step forward counts, even when the path is uneven. Sometimes, the hardest part of love is not the feeling, but the foundation it stands on. You may find someone who makes your heart dance, someone who listens, someone who stays. But if the roots are shaky, if family wounds, unspoken truths, or stubborn silences surround your union, you must pause and ask yourself, am I building a future or just reacting to a moment? Somoto's story reminds us that doing the right thing doesn't always feel easy, and doing what feels easy isn't always right. He didn't fall into the trap of rushing into marriage just to clean up a mistake. Instead, he wrestled with it. He asked the hard questions, sought counsel, and refused to let emotions drown his sense. To those listening, don't confuse love with obligation, and don't let pity push you into a lifetime commitment you are not prepared for. It's one thing to feel sorry for someone's pain. It's another to carry the weight of it without knowing how deep the cracks go. If you must build with eyes open. Ask questions. Seek wisdom. Don't skip steps just because others say you should. Tradition is not a prison, and love is not blind. It sees, accepts, and still chooses carefully. And if you're Ziora in this story, someone whose family is fractured, please know that your broken background doesn't disqualify you from being loved rightly. But honesty matters. Healing matters. And making peace with your story matters even more. Don't hide your past. Own it. And invite those who love you into it, not as rescuers, but as builders who understand that every house worth living in takes time to raise. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the gift of love, the kind that challenges us, stretches us, and sometimes asks us to stand still when our hearts want to run. For every listener navigating confusion, facing decisions that weigh heavy like a stone in their chest, Lord, we ask for your divine clarity. May they not be led by fear or pity, but by truth and wisdom. We pray for those who come from broken homes, homes where silence replaced hugs and absence replaced guidance. Lord, remind them that their past is not a prophecy. Heal the wounds they carry. Fill the gaps their fathers or mothers left behind. Let them know they are still worthy of love and not defined by the ones who walked away. We pray for every man and woman at the edge of commitment. Lord, teach them to look beyond the moment. Give them discernment to see what eyes cannot. Let them build on rock, not sand. Let them seek peace, not perfection. And let your Spirit guide their every step. For every child born into uncertain beginnings, we ask for covering. Let their lives not be marked by confusion, but by grace. Let their names carry joy, not sorrow. May they be the beginning of new stories, not repeats of old wounds. And finally, Lord, for the one listening who feels lost, remind them that you never abandon, you never give up, and your timing is always on time. Restore what was broken, heal what was hidden, and guide what seems unclear. In Jesus' name, we pray, amen. Hope you enjoyed this interesting story. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. See you again in my next story.